Shout out to all the Patreon supporters that help make content like this flow. If you wanted access to exclusive videos, one-on-one coaching, and heck, so much more, then come on by. What's up, everyone? It's your boy Shaft, aka That Mill Guy, coming at you with a video series that I don't really know what to call. We're just going to kind of roll with it for now. But it's going to be one where I take a look at certain cards that are prevalent in the modern meta, or maybe we talk about another format and it's prevalent in that format, and how Mill can maybe take use of it. Now, obviously, we have these settled archetypes in Mill right now. We have Dimir Mill, we have Azorius Mill, and we have Esper Mill. And we generally understand the cards that work and the cards that don't work. Obviously, there's a lot of ways and really just a lot of people testing Mill in general. And so we have a general grasp of what works and what doesn't. But in a lot of ways, some cards are just kind of left behind to concept. They're not really tested. And now what I'm here to do is maybe not exactly test those cards, but provide you some knowledge as to why certain cards may or may not work, and maybe give you some inspiration to test them out. Maybe provide some conversation, some back and forth to maybe convince each other. I help you, you help me. Maybe we can get there on some cards. And as the title in the video suggests, today we're going to be talking about URZA'S Saga. The land itself that's really taken over Modern in a very big way. Not really ban-worthy, just another powerful piece of Modern. Another part of the pillar that is the house of Modern itself. Now we're going to talk about what this means in Mill, how we can use it. We're going to talk about some pros and cons. And then we're going to, at the end of the video, go through a deck list that I came up with. An example of what I think URZA'S Saga can do for Mill as an archetype and how I would initially build it. And I would like some feedback from all of you. So let's just hop right into it. URZA'S Saga itself, an enchantment land. Saga, when it enters the battlefield and the subsequent triggers happen on the main phase, not on upkeep, not on draw, on main phase, which is important. URZA'S Saga gains on the first one, tap, add Colorless, cool. Second one, it gains URZA'S Saga 2 tap, create a 0/0 colorless construct, artifact creature token. This creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. Now we're thinking, Mill doesn't really play a lot of artifacts, and even beforehand, we kind of dropped him as Mirror Corp. So what are we thinking of in terms of that? We're going to get into that in a sec. And then the third part, before the land itself disappears completely, search your library for an artifact with mana cost 0 or 1 and put it on the battlefield. And now that wording is going to be very relevant for us as we explore this card down the line. But at face value, we have an enchantment land, so a land that actually does die to cards like Disenchant outside of regular land hate, and not a legendary land, so a land that we can have multiple copies of out at the same time. So how can we take advantage of this? Well, let's take a look at what decks are taking advantage of this right now and what they're doing. Let's hop into the Modern meta itself. We're talking about Hammer, first and foremost. So Hammer itself does some interesting things here. So really, the big piece of this card in Hammer is just to get Colossus Hammer. We understand that card, right? 1 mana artifact coming in, providing big amounts of power and toughness boosts, removing the flying off creatures. Cool. It almost feels like a weird creature combo deck. But also in the deck, we start seeing other value cards. Of course, it can provide Springleaf Drums, which kind of rare, but it can do that. Also provide Mishra's Baubles if we want to draw through and grind. Shadow Spears for a little bit different angle in terms of attacking, so providing trample and lifelink. And then finally, if we want any graveyard hate against something like Loving End, specifically for something like Hammer Time that does require graveyard hate, whereas Mill has stuff like Surgical Extraction, we could grab Soul Guide Lantern. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. And then also add a baseline. We got the creatures. Memnite and Ornithopter cost 0. You can tutor up some creatures if you got board wiped and you're trying to build your way back up. Out of the sideboard, we see an extra addition of something like Pithing Needle, which can be grabbed as well. So there's a lot of options to this card, but primarily in this deck, we're getting Colossus Hammer. Now we start getting really spicy when we head into the Luros Jund lists that have been coming out in Modern recently. So Zoomer Jund, as the kids like to call it, no Lilianas. We're playing with Luros. So we got Dragon's Rage Chandler, Ragavans, Tarmogoyfs. Those are the usual threats. We even got Ren in 6 for some long-term value. But when we think about Ren in 6, that's when things get a little bit interesting in terms of URZA'S Saga. Now remember, URZA'S Saga disappears after its third piece happens. After you tutor, it disappears. So it's something like Ren in 6. We see in a lot of these matchups that if our opponent has resolved Ren in 6, they're actually grabbing the URZA Sagas out of their yard and then just playing them, right? So this is a great way for this deck itself to recur some of these lands. So what are the targets here? So obviously we have 4 baubles here. This is a deck that's just trying to continue to draw through, so it's not like 2 like the other list we saw. We have Nihil Spellbomb as their form of primary graveyard hate. So in this case specifically, they want to make sure that they have the draw on the same trigger. They get the exile and the draw. This is a deck that wants to pump through. So it's not like Soul Guide Lantern where you get either or. This deck wants to do both, right? So it wants to draw and exile. Pyrite Spellbomb as an extra form of removal. Great way to just get threats off the board. So excellent option for that, especially because they're playing red. And then of course the usual Shadow Spear, providing trample and lifelink against some maybe burn matchups or some aggressive matchups where you want to grind out and win the mirrors somehow. So that's interesting as well. We look at the sideboard suite, we see more access to more Nihil Spellbomb, so in graveyard heavy matchups, they do want access to them in their opening hand, but then also as the game goes on, the URZA Saga provides copies of that once they use their first one. And also stuff like Pithing Needle for activated abilities such as Field of Ruin activations, or heck, even Planeswalkers. So we're starting to understand where this card is kind of used. It's kind of for value. You get some tutor ability later in the game, and you get some grind factor. It's kind of interesting, but obviously we're seeing it in a deck with 23 lands. It has all of its colored sources covered. So that's something to think about in Mill, especially when you think about casting spells with blue on turn 1, such as Rune Crab, and then casting spells like Fractured Sanity that require 3 blue. Kind of important when you're playing alongside Field of Ruin, but we'll get to those in a second. So that's how we use the card in general. Value, aggression, and a little bit of combo all wrapped up in one. So what is our first pro with this deck? As we can see, the first pro to using a card like URZA Saga is going to be creating threats, right? We create creatures like construct tokens. We got 0/0 constructs, and obviously if we play some type of artifact package with Mishra's baubles and stuff, the artifact can get pretty big. By itself, it's just a 1/1. And remember that URZA Saga is not an artifact land. It's not an artifact enchantment land, it's just an enchantment land. So it's not like it turns on the construct itself. So we get some threats. We have some blockers. Heck, if we clear the way with a little bit of removal, we get to swing through, maybe an alternate form of action. What's another pro for this card? Well, we have Tutors. This obviously is able to look through our deck and look for key pieces that we need at any moment in the game. If we're up against a graveyard matchup, well, we're just going to grab Soul Guide Lantern. If we're up against, again, a burn matchup, okay, we could grab the Shadow Spear, and gain some life and maybe trample over some weak threats. Okay, interesting in that aspect as well. What are we specifically tutoring for with URZA Saga? Well, before we get into the examples, I want to touch base on the 0 and 1 aspect of this again. Look at the wording here. It's not talking about converted mana cost or mana value 0 and 1. It's talking about the mana cost itself. The mana cost itself must be 0 color. It must be 0 or 1. It must literally have those symbols exactly in the mana cost. So you were not able to get spicy things like Portable Hole. The card would be busted. Are you kidding me? You create 2 threats over a series of 2 to 3 turns, and then you Portable Hole to remove a threat and just swing through? No. Wizards knew what they were doing when they were designing this card. You can't grab stuff like this because it doesn't cost 1. Its converted mana cost is 1, but it doesn't cost 1 colorless. Obviously, as I mentioned, you're able to grab stuff like Soul Guide Lantern. So this is going to be a great option for us. Even if we need to tutor it out, this is a great way to grind and also provide graveyard hate against our opponent. So great there. And obviously, we're going to be playing something like Luros, usually in a URZA Saga deck. So we're even able to recast this once we activate it. Next up, as I've been mentioning, Shadow Spear. So again, creatures you control get +1/+1. So if we were to put this on a crab, yeah, 0 power. Now it has some power. And the Ruin Crabs become 0/1/3s, which is relevant because we do dodge Unholy Heats when they don't have Delirium. And they also dodge other 2 damage spells. I'm thinking of Bone Crusher Giants out of the Cascade matchup. So pretty relevant having 3 toughness. And then also the Ruin Crabs themselves become 1/4s. Okay, now we're dodging bigger stuff like a Lightning Bolt, which is hella relevant. So on top of the trample, on top of the lifelink, which is relatively useful against the burn matchups, we do get the added ability of permanents your opponent's control lose hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So specifically important against Veil of Summer. Not so much anymore against Leyline of Sanctity, where the meta has learned that stuff like Tasha's Hideous Laughter, Ruin Crab, and Fractured Sanity now gets around hexproof effects, so it's not really as relevant of a card, or sorry, an effect, but specifically at an LGS level where you might run up against something like Bogles, this could be very fantastic against that, and especially against a Resolved Veil of Summer, not so much stopping your mill spells, but stopping a little bit of your removal. That hexproof from blue and black, activate this, that's gone. The indestructibility, also relevant against something like Cauldron Complete. The artifact itself and the germ both have indestructible. You have to exile them. Now, obviously, if you're playing something like Azorius Mill or Esper Mill, the indestructibility is not a problem. You're playing stuff like, well, Prismatic Ending. But in this case, the hexproof is relevant, and the indestructibility of destroying something like that is also really relevant there too. So that's kind of sweet. Just the small corner cases, so you have some applicability all throughout. So that's kind of fun. And finally, we have Mishra's Bauble. And obviously, we're, again, as I've been mentioning, ideally in a build with URZA'S Saga, we're playing Luros. So we're then able to obviously take advantage of Bauble as well, but then we're able to tutor Bauble if we need to. So we have options all across the board. Let's say we used up all our Soul Guide Lanterns, we want to grab the last Bauble out of our deck to keep grinding through. Look at what our opponent's drawing next, draw through, and just keep cycling through our deck. Just keep that aggro going, draw our mill spells. That's how we want to win ultimately, and URZA'S Saga gives us a way to potentially grind out in the mid game. So that's pretty sweet there. Finally, I believe my next section here is I want to talk about some of the cons. So ultimately, there are some downsides, right? And I just want to go through them at face value here, okay? Realistically, the first big downside is the cost. This is a real cost. I know not all of us have Mana Traders accounts, and not all of us can just rent cards, and not all of us really just have that money available to us, especially on MTGO and in paper. The card is expensive. So that's going to be a massive downside, especially when you're thinking of Mana Traders. That's a big part of your Mana Traders rental limit, right? And you're not going to be able to rent some of the other cards that you might want to play alongside that. In paper, obviously another big story too. Very expensive card, and you're really just using this for testing right now. Are you even playing an URZA'S Saga strategy alongside this? Well, if you are, well, hey, you have the most expensive card, you have mill, cool, just test it out. But cost is a very relevant factor, and it needs to be brought up there. This being colorless as well is also really relevant. Remember that Mill plays 4 Field of Ruins already, 3 to 4. Esper plays 3. The Dimir and Azorius builds can afford to play 4. And that's really pushing the limits of it already. I think a lot of people understand that Field of Ruin is a necessary evil. It's a very powerful card, turning on 2 landfall triggers for our crabs and also forcing our opponent to search for archive traps. You already know the basics, but it's unfortunately a downside, especially now when you think about cards like Fractured Sanity. Having 3 blue on turn 3 is very important, so you do need to unfortunately crack something like Field of Ruin, which is a necessary evil, to just get that blue pip. So it's going to be a tough sell to now play Field of Ruins and or URZA'S Saga, which is another piece of colorless artifact, colorless land that, well, doesn't cast our crabs on turn 1 and doesn't cast our really any of our mill spells. It's unfortunate. This makes it a lot harder to even cast Tasha's Hideous Laughter, which is just 2 blue. So the mill deck list has really just pushed towards blue X, and you really need to have a lot of blue mana, which is kind of one of the downsides of playing something like Shelldock Isle, but that's a whole other story. There's a reason that card doesn't see a lot of play. We want, even though that card taps for blue, we want untapped blue. Here comes it on tap, but we need blue mana, so definitely something to think about there. And finally, it really just creates a divide, a fork in the road, if you like the picture there, in terms of what the game plan is for Mill. Now, historically, Mill is not a type of strategy that plays to the board, right? We have crabs, obviously, that can take us through the long game, but we're not really attacking. And that's really the big problematic thing with it. We can defend. We throw our crabs in the way of chumpers and goblin guides and bigger creatures. That's fine. But we're not really looking for a proactive attack plan. This would be something that we would have to really build into. So that can be a tough avenue. Kind of splits our attention a little bit, especially when you're thinking of creating and tapping your mana to create those URZA'S tokens. That's 2 mana and a land tapped. That's a lot of mana. That's a lot of time that you're not doing anything, such as cycling a Fractured Sanity or heck, even casting a counter spell, whatever it is. That's a lot of time not doing that. So that can be a little bit of a difficult factor as well. Now, obviously, there's a lot more downsides, but I felt like these were the big 3 things to think about when you're thinking about this deck seriously. So obviously, with the pros and cons in mind, I did want to propose a potential deck list to think about with URZA'S Saga. Let's go right into that. I'm thinking mono blue. Now, obviously, as I was talking about with the colorless factor, colors are honestly the biggest downside for this card. We still want to play Field of Ruin. I'm playing 3 here, but notice I'm playing 20 lands, right? 5 rows of 4 down there, do the math, 20 lands, and I'm playing as many islands as I can. I want to make sure that I can fetch for as many colored sources as I can with my 5 fetches, my 3 Field of Ruins. I can't go up on fetches because I need more lands. This isn't Legacy, and I need to make sure the URZA Sagas are there as well. And I want to play a full 4. I want to test this out, and I want to push it. So with this deck list in mind, I'm playing mono blue, so I don't really have a lot of great options. So we have the regular mill package: 4 Archive Trap, 4 Tasha's, 4 Visions Beyond, 4 Fractured, 4 Ruin, 4 Hedron. It's a tough mix. It's kind of like when you think about building a combo deck or you're building Tron. There's really the Tron package or the combo package. Well, here, because of the power of something like Modern Mill, we have the mill package. So we got to throw that stuff in. Now, the stuff that comes in ancillary, well, we're thinking first and foremost of turn 1 removal. Now, obviously, I made a video quite recently talking about how mill players need to be playing more removal. So, with that in mind, I need turn 1 removal. So I'm thinking Stern Dismissal. Now, Stern Dismissal is really interesting, just because obviously return target creature to their owner's hand. That's going to be really great against something like Murktide Region. They paid 2 mana, they exiled a bunch of cards from their graveyard, potentially turning off Delirium, and you're just returning to their hand and making them do it again. Kind of fun there. Obviously able to get that turn 1 Ragavan, that turn 1 Dragon's Rage Channeler. Perfect. But also, it's return target enchantment to their owner's hand as well. Kind of funny tech against the URZA Saga, because URZA Saga is an enchantment. So, get to play a little bit of LD, if you know what I mean. So, they play the URZA Saga, you're able to put them back on tempo. So, Stern Dismissal kind of has some fun aspects against URZA Saga. So, that's why I thought it would be kind of a fun piece of turn 1 removal. In terms of the package itself, we have the 4 baubles because we're playing Loros in our sideboard, so I figured why not draw through, especially with the same mindset, thinking of something like a Remand. I'm not playing Counterspell, I'm playing Remand because we just want to hold off our opponent temporarily until we get to our URZA Saga tutor target that gets one of our 3 Soul Guides, until we get against our burn opponent to our Shadow Spear that's going to slowly help us start gaining some life. So stuff like that is what we want. Just keep drawing through. We got the Shadow Spears, got the Soul Guides, and we can tutor for the Mishra's Bauble. And that's really the main board package. We're thinking of something like Azorius Mill, but instead of the white cards, we have artifacts. So mono blue kind of fits for me there. In terms of the sideboard, again, more 1-drop low-costed artifacts. We need more life gain, so I'm thinking Profane Memento. Obviously, slam dunk, gotta play it. This is probably our best piece of life gain in terms of mono blue. I might even think about playing 4. I might even drop that 4th Soul Guide to play the 3. Now, the 4th Soul Guide's in there just to be the 4th Soul Guide. There's a lot of graveyard shenanigans in Modern, especially with the return of Phoenix thanks to Spike, and I'll tell you what, you need to remove that. Obviously, the 4 Surgicals are in there because one of the things that Mill does best is deal with fragile combo strategies, and you can't really lose that just playing URZA Saga. It doesn't provide us with enough. And we need Surgical, so we got to play it there. There's an option to play something like Watery Grave in our main board to potentially hard cast the Surgical Extractions, so that's an option as well. In that case, maybe even just beyond a Watery Grave, maybe play a Triome, maybe play one of those Cycling lands out of Amonkhet that are 2 color and the cycle for 2. That could be pretty cool too. The rest of our sideboard is really just rounded up with a variety of hate. So we're thinking Aether Gust, Tested Talents, Mystical Dispute, the regular bit. Okay, I didn't want to go too deep into it, but that's really my final list there. And in a lot of ways, it does things right because it plays the mill package, but it tries to take on the URZA'S package and really put a spin to it, see what it can do. And that's really where I want to end off the video. I know I didn't really give you a definitive look as to whether or not this card can work. I just wanted to give you some ideas and really not say definitively yes or no. And I'm gonna be honest, at the end of this video, I'm still kind of leaning towards no. But as a content creator, I am, obligated, to kind of put these ideas forth and maybe test them in the future. So let me know in the comment section down below if this is a deck list that you would like me to kind of try out and see me test and see kind of once and for all if URZA Saga is worth it. And also let me know in the comment section if you want to see me talk about more cards potentially being in mill, more modern staples that you see potentially having a home in mill. If this is a style of video that you like, then I mean that's how you do it. Like, comment, and everything. But we're gonna leave it there. What do you think of URZA'S Saga? Not just as a modern card, obviously it's kind of powerful, but what do you think about URZA'S Saga in modern mill? Let me know. But remember that even the impossible is possible, and as we ponder that thought, I hope you'll join me next time for the next card as we take a glimpse into the unthinkable.